I know we had a presentation in the main room about that, but we're going to be talking about our experience of using co-production. So Ruby is going to share the slides. I'll have to do that awful Chris Whitty next slide thing, won't I?
Yeah, I'll just quickly say for housekeeping that this session is a recorded one. So we ask you keep your cameras and microphones off anyway when you're not talking. But if you don't want to be in the recording, then if you do want to talk, just leave your camera off. Use the raised hand option if you have something to say, or put something in the chat because I will be monitoring it. So yeah, I'll just share the slides.
Love technology.
It's not just me that can't see them, then that's good, because sometimes I can't, which is really helpful.
No, I think Ruby's trying.
Okay, sorry, I am getting there. Okay, I've got them up. It's because we've got a remote desktop and a normal one, and I have to go between the two, so it's a bit of a faff. So yep. Okay, come out of that, do share. Go back into that. Okay,
Oh, incredible.
can everyone see them?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, brilliant. I will mute myself and
Super.
Go ahead.
So the next slide, please. So why co-produce? We put this as a kind of a starting slide because it's the right thing to do. Our designated key worker piece of co-production followed on from a piece of work that we did with Active Mobs, kind of conceptualizing what co-production should look like in the county. We wanted to ensure our programme was successful and to be that it was rooted in the real life experience of families. We had heard from families how dysfunctional the system was, and what we didn't want to do was just layer another layer of complexity into that already complex system for families. We really wanted to learn from what hadn't worked, from maybe the institutionalized way and defensive way services had been delivered. And we wanted to make sure that our co-production work really added value and brought around sustainable change. So next slide, please. What we did quite early on when we were writing the bid is I commissioned Active Mob, and Joe's here from Active Mob as our co-production partner. They're a community interest company with specialism in engagement and co-production, and I'd worked with them in a previous piece of work and knew how great they were. So I wanted to get this right, so we commissioned them to come and work alongside us. As I say, we had done some initial fact finding with about 10 families whose young people had been in Tier 4, which gave us some themes for investigation. And then my job really was to ensure we had buy-in from system leaders across health and social care, that this was going to be a fully co-produced programme. So I'll hand over to Jo from Active Mobs, who will talk us through how she's supported us with how the organisation has supported us with the programme.
Fabulous, thank you, Emma. So absolutely, as Emma said, we are a community interest company, and we do this in lots of different guises on lots of different topics. And I suppose the thing to say is that that's our expertise and our specialism. So this topic was completely new, although I feel like, yeah, we've learned so much along the way. Of course, the knowledge is out there of our families, children, young people and professionals we're working with. But in terms of our approach and the way that engage with people is very different. So we take an asset-based approach, which means that we spend time with people, spend time with communities, find out where do they go, who do they trust. We always use that absolutely awful phrase, which is completely wrong. People are hard to reach. They're not. It's a complete myth. People aren't hard to reach. We just don't really do the right things at the right time. I think the other one we hear is service resistant as well. I mean, really. So what we do is we spend time with people and we find out, who do they talk to? And that can be the formal assets that we probably know about, whether it's services we commission or children's centres. But a lot of the time it's those informal networks and those informal groups, and that can really vary depending from one community to the other, across one street to another. So some of our communities, you don't cross over the street, you don't go over there. So it's great that you do things there, but we can't go there. So it's really about understanding all those nuances, all those people and places that can connect, and starting with people and putting people at the heart of that. So we recruited families, we then worked with them to kind of snowball and to find other people and other families and young people that we could work with in order to do this. The next thing that was really important is that this isn't transactional. This is a really holistic approach in terms of not just the co-production, but in terms of creating that environment and that space for people to do this. And that is so important, that we have that safe space, that there was that regular feedback, that we could adapt our approach. And we worked with people to do that. And every part of our journey and still works completely different in terms of how we might do something. And that's really important to understand in terms of working with such a diverse group and such a big kind of space in terms of Kent. As I say, our communities are all completely different in terms of that, but so important. And as Emma said at the very start, one of the early conversations we had pre all of this key worker, what even is a key worker, when we did that piece of work or this piece of work, was actually, what does co-production mean? What does it mean to our families in Kent? And very early on, we heard about, you know, is it film? I think there was something going on in Coronation Street. Was there something to do with that? But we needed to understand that and understand about how actually, what does it mean? What will you be doing if we're working in a co-productive way? How would I feel? What language would we be using? And that was so important, because actually that really set us up well in terms of this piece of co-production around Keyworker and other offshoots that we've then been doing. So important. But that checking back has been really important, as well as actually what have our families got from this? And we know that along this journey, not only have we created and been involved in co-producing an incredible framework, an incredible function kind of in Kent in terms of Keyworker, but actually our families along the journey have got that really informal kind of peer support and knowledge sharing. And sometimes some of our sessions that we've had and things that we've done have just been spent doing that thing, because that was really important to one or two people on the call. So really adaptive in terms of what we're doing. And of course, you said we did, again, a really fabulous local authority phrase, but we said we did approach. It was really important in that early work that we heard from families and children, young people, where there was that low level of distrust. There was that, yeah, you're kind of saying this, but I don't believe you. I don't believe that's actually how we want to be working in Kent. We needed to have that feedback loop. We needed to be doing things involving people and showing that change, experiencing that change, seeing that change. And that's so important, because I think too often when we talk about co-production, we use it very loosely. We use it in a way where we aren't really doing co-production, and we don't feel the actual difference that's making. So we're asking these questions, but we're not then listening. So this was really important that we had that complete feedback loop. So across the bottom, you'll see these are just a very few things in the journey of our key worker, and I could talk for hours and days on this. Earlier on, we were working with some of our families that were involved, and I have got the figures. I was trying to find out for the first group. So we've had 53 families fully on that co-productive journey, and then others that have been involved in terms of designing this part or involved in just one part, but which is incredible number. What was it from this whole experience in terms of the key worker function? We call that, and I'll explain that why, that you really kind of valued and that really sticks in your mind. And they all said that it was because this morning, because whoever they is, the ivory tower, they listened to what we wanted, and now we are experiencing that. And not only are we experiencing that, it's actually making a difference to my family, to my child, to my young person. And that is just incredible. So that's what they really feel from this, and that particularly around that peer associate role, which I'll come on to. So early on in terms of this process, so we've done that conversation around what does co-production mean in Ken? What do we need to be doing so that it shows, i.e., look, Joe, you know, when we create and have these meetings at 3 o'clock in the day and I've got to pick the kids up, it doesn't really show that you're trying to be in a co-productive way. It doesn't really show that you're doing co-production. So what does it look like? So we worked with a really small number in terms of a horizon scan to really think about how do we need to do this, because the key worker concept was something that we were piloting in Kent, but we really needed to understand in terms of that product creation, I suppose, so to say, what does it mean? What's the difference that's going to make the difference in Kent? So whilst we have this thing that, you know, we can inform, let's really understand what's needed. What is needed? What are our hopes? What are our fears? And very early on, we heard about, oh, you know, is it just going to be another layer of something? You know, well, how is this different to the Navigator? We need to really understand those things. But that difference that makes the difference was so important. And we really, really explored that and kind of came through the layers. I like to think of the Russian doll that you start to unpick, and really started to understand from families, what would be the difference? What would they be doing? How would you be feeling? And it was really clear and evident from the families that we work with, and then the wider kind of groups that we then involved, that for this to really work, it couldn't just be one thing. It needed to have lots of different offshoots, lots of different skill sets, lots of little, lots of different connections into the system. So, you know, we need some people that are going to work with us. We need these peer associate roles that can support me kind of day in, day out. But we also need a part of that role and somebody also to be influencing the system and challenging. So it's great that you have this, you know, this framework, but actually this is different and we need to respond in a different way for this young person and to meet their needs. So that was really, really important. Another piece that we did in terms of co-production then as a kind of a little offshoot was to fully co-produce. What does that peer associate role need to look like? What would they be doing? Down to creating the job spec then. And then we created the questions that we might be asking in terms of the interview, informing maybe parts of the training and then engaging with them even now to think about other parts of kind of co-production and recruitment of families. So that's kind of a real ongoing piece of work, which is incredible, and the difference they make. So it's been fabulous to have had this concept, and then finally we meet this team that are doing the thing that the families have all said they wanted, and they're all engaging with them, which is incredible. Exploring information needs more broadly, that's another piece of kind of offshoot of co-production, which again has been important in terms of Keyworker. So around a conversation guide, which again we could talk for hours on, and also around some work with Vari, who will be introducing herself shortly in terms of that kind of tier 4 and information. But again, really important pieces of work that we need to do, but we need to co-produce them with people rather than assuming it's a leaflet that you need. Of course not. And then there's been other offshoots of these pieces of work. So the DSD, the DSR, that have all been really important things to do. We move on to the next slide because I will just talk for hours about what we've done. Fabulous. So, I mean, this is kind of requirements for enabling a good co-production. I mean, this isn't an exhaustive list. And as I say, this is kind of, I suppose, for us, what we look for in terms of a bit of a shopping list. So we work with different places to do this, different topics. But this is really, I suppose, some of the key things that the areas that do this and enable this to be embedded, enable change to happen. These are some of the things they really have. And I'll pick a few out that I think are really important. So for me, one of the top things is around that strong leadership, the networks and the system. And by that, we mean those champions that are across the system that get this. They're in that senior level, but they get what we're doing. They're ready to listen. They are bold. They're up for change. They're up for the fact that we need to do something different in order to get that business case, to make the case further on. They're really up for that and they want to make this change. They want to enable that change. And of course, probably folks on this call, we're all across, you know, health and social care primarily, and we all talk a special language. And so sometimes those leaders are wider in that system. They're wider because maybe they have the influence or they use a slightly different language. And that's what's been really important, that we notice that we've been able to get those champions in different places that are all talking and supporting this movement, which is really, really important. Co-production has a seat at the table. So by the fact that we are a resource that we come in, or maybe there's other teams internally that you use, but this requires a time and a resource. This isn't something that we can just add on to your day job. You're just going to tick a box. This has to have a seat at the table, and it needs to have a safe space in order for us to do that. We need to support our staff. We need to be enabling them and saying, yeah, absolutely, your permission. That's a lot of what we see. Absolutely, you can work in this way, and having that permission to be able to do that. But of course, not only does it need a seat at the table because it's obviously the thing that we should be doing, let's all face the reality that moving forward, children and young people, this is what they're going to expect. This is what should be happening. You know, if you're not doing this, you know, they're going to be asking those questions. So we need to be doing that to ensure that we can create services, we can be working in a way that's going to make a difference, especially because now we change so much in terms of what we do, how we interact, the fact that we have different worlds that we even live in terms of around the metaverse and what we should be doing. We have to be embracing these things, and it's so important to be doing that. Of course, valuing everyone's perspective is so important around that table, not just in terms of family, but also in terms of that front line has been really important to kind of get both sides, especially when you're co-producing something as an outcome. But of course, those skills and co-production skills we've touched on, the fact that we worked hard early on to understand what does that co-production framework look like for Kent? What are the words? What are the languages? How would it feel? What would you be doing? The fact around the debriefing has been so important, but also about that trust and honesty and transparency. We learned that early on so much from our families in terms of, you know, what they'd experienced previously, what they really wanted to happen, what was going to make the difference. So, you know, I don't believe this is going to happen. Okay, so what could we do that we could start to shift some of that? What would that be? And I think that loop in terms of understanding and sharing the learning, sharing the fact that we're making change has been so important. Making an actual difference. I mean, I think that goes without saying, as well as the asset-based approach. And I think the last thing to leave you with is, if I was Nike, I'd say just do it. But I think with these things, we just have to start. And that is the exciting part, that when we start on this, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what we're going to come up with. And, you know, sometimes we might start and I predict and think, oh, I think it's going to be this. And it's completely different. But that's so exciting. But of course, we have to take in terms of that system. Families and young people absolutely get this. But in my experience, it's that system. We need to take them along with this, because for some parts of the system, that's a little bit scary that Joe doesn't know the outcome. We don't know what we're going to come up with, but it's going to be amazing and cool and meet the need of people. So we need to take them along with that. But I'd say absolutely just start doing it and have fun and learn as you go through. Yeah, it will be intuitive. And I think we always say just follow our noses, which is fabulous. I'm going to pause there.
Next slide, please, Ruby. Thanks, Joe. So next we have two lived experience experts, and following on from the work of working in a co-productive way, we engaged with families, found the real benefit of working really closely with people with lived experience. And from that, I've recently, as part of the programme, employed two parents who are Vari and Alice. And we have a little video of both of them just talking about their new roles and their experience. They only started work with us formally in December, though Vari's been on the journey for many, many months before that, and has was one of the families that was part of the co-production. So I'll shut up now. I'll let, hopefully the technology is going to work and Ruby's going to make it, and we'll hear from Vari and Alice. So, oh.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I'll just get them up.
Yeah, you have to come out of the presentation to make it work.
Okay.
It didn't work last time, people. No, it's still not working. We prepared these videos so Alice and Vari didn't feel under pressure speaking live in a meeting, but last time they had to speak live anyway. So I'm wondering, Alice, Vari, would you mind reading your statements live again? Sorry.
No, that's fine. Vari, do you want me to go first?
Yeah, super.
Hello, my name's Alice. I work as a lived experience expert, predominantly on the designated Keyworker programme. I had chosen to record my contribution today to ensure I keep the confidence and trust of my young person and only share parts of our story that they are comfortable with. When my autistic child was in a period of crisis, I found that services were solely focused on his needs, but the crisis affected every aspect of our family life. There was no focus on the bigger picture. As a family, we felt particularly unsupported. Once my son stabilised, the support was quickly withdrawn, but the challenges remained, in us helping him understand and recover from the trauma of his experience. I felt strongly that I'd become part of a system where I was unable to ensure my child's rights were followed. So I decided to study law to give me the skills and knowledge to reframe conversations and challenge professionals in a respectful way. When I saw the role of the lived experience expert advertised, I knew I had to apply, as I felt passionately that I wanted to drive change through co-production. My children were concerned at first when I took on this role. They were worried that I'd be sharing things that they did not want me to. So together we had to agree on boundaries of what could and couldn't be shared with different audiences. I have drawn on my personal experience as part of my role, but it does not require me to share every aspect of it. Rather, I'm bringing the voice of families to the table. As part of my role, we've assessed the existing services, we've assessed how the existing services work for families. We've suggested any changes that are necessary and identified any gaps in the service to ensure the family at the heart of the key working programme. I've also worked with peer-led parent support groups to identify and develop support for facilitators to strengthen the support that we offer around families. Thank you. Over to Vari.
Oh, you're on mute, Vari.
Okay. Hi, thank you, Alice. Hi, I'm Vari, and I work as a lived experience expert for the designated key worker programme, among other projects in Kent. I'd originally wanted to record this as it is important to me that I'm in control of our story and how I talk about it. I wanted to share with you how parents, including myself, have been involved from before the programme actually started. In July 2020, I was contacted to talk about my experience of caring for a young person who had needed mental health treatment. At this stage, several families were contacted. I learned that this was to help shape the role of the key worker for the new designated key worker programme pilot. I had a lot to say, and this was probably one of the few times someone that had asked me about the whole experience had had enough time to listen properly. When the council then asked for a parent or carer to join the interview panels as the first practitioners were recruited, I volunteered. I really felt it was an opportunity to help to develop a service that hadn't existed for us at a time when we were pitched into a system that was really distressing and hard to navigate. This led to me joining the steering group and having an opportunity to contribute based on our experiences. My being involved then led to conversations which sparked opportunities for more parents and carers to be involved in some form of engagement. For example, in developing some information about what it's like to have a child go into hospital in Kent for mental health treatment. I've been really careful to consider how to share my experience productively, think about how the things that happened to me can be used to make changes that benefit families in the future. When the opportunity came up at the end of last year, I therefore decided to apply for the newly created lived experience expert roles. I'm really clear that opening doors to people with lived experience to contribute as, when and how they can is essential, and I really hope my role will be part of encouraging more engagement and ultimately co-production of services that people use.
Okay, I'll just reshare the slides now.
Oh, thank you, Vari. Thank you, Alice. Brilliant. Thanks, Ruby. So the impact of all of this is we do, I'm really pleased to say, have a highly successful designated key worker programme. It is seen as best practice, and we've reduced our numbers of young people in tier 4 from about 20 at one point to down to just 4. And we've done that because we've delivered services that make a difference for families' lives. I'd say co-production is cost effective in the long run, because if you do it right, it saves time and it saves money because it gets things right for families. We have modelled best practice out from our little pond of designated key worker out into the wider Kent and Medway system. And currently, Vari and Alice are involved in developing an engagement and co-production framework. We have a charter. We don't have a framework that sits alongside that. And Alice and Vari are involved with the Kent and Medway ICB in developing that. So some final words. Next slide, please. I guess what I wanted to say is I really think that services are lagging behind young people's needs. Our service models are quite antiquated and old, and young people are outstripping them. But co-production has brought real-time change for us and created a feedback loop that we can move quite quickly and move things on quickly. Co-production isn't a one and done activity. We need to keep it live. We need to continue to do this. Not everything needs to be co-produced, but you need to be really clear. If you're consulting, you're consulting. If you're just engaging, you're engaging. Co-production is different. But we need to listen and be open to change and smash the culture of defensiveness, because we found that services historically have been a little bit defensive about what they do. But landing co-production in the right way enables that culture of defensiveness to be brought down. This is just a little, the next slide, thank you, Ruby, is just some of the areas that we are co-producting, taking a co-productive approach to at the moment. I won't read through them in detail, but the work keeps spiraling out. So when you co-produce one area, it leads into other areas. So yeah, I think, is that the last slide? Brilliant. That's just Joe and I's contact details if anybody wants to have any more information or make contact. But other than that, does anybody have a question or a comment or any thoughts they'd like to share? That's the end of the presentation. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Vari. Thanks, Alice. Did we stun you into silence?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I was just trying to see in the list who we still have.
I think it's there's 2 Claires and an Anne-Marie.
I wonder if any of the question raised in the first workshop, if any of the answers to that may be useful for this, if there aren't any questions. But Claire, if you've got something.
Claire's going to be brave.
No, I was just saying we're still here. I've not like disappeared because everybody's really quiet.
Oh, hi, Claire.
Where are you from, Claire?
I work for, well, you can see above my head, the Commissioning Support Unit. I'm the clinical team lead for children and young people's continuing care.
Ah, right.
So we do the assessments and process the procuring and things for packages of care.
Yeah.
But just on the essence of co-production, I think how it kind of fits in with us at the moment, we're kind of working across 5 different areas to try and make the service the same. So it doesn't matter where you go, the continuing care process is exactly the same. And we've recently changed all our documentation so we can capture the voice of the child and family as much as we can, because obviously predominantly our children and young people are complex health, so they don't have a voice themselves, unfortunately. But we obviously look to the parents or the family for how that support would benefit them and the child, and we're capturing that a lot better. So hopefully it will help to provide a better, more personalised service for them.
That's brilliant. Yeah. Super. I mean, I was just giving an example of one thing that we did. I asked Joe to go away and come back. What information do families need? And I really thought it would come back and say, it's a leaflet. This is what you need to do. And it's turned into this good conversations tool, which is a way that parents can kind of structure what they need to talk to professionals about. So they can, instead of just going in and kind of blurting and then leaving and thinking, oh, I didn't really get across what I was saying. So it's really fascinating that when you set off on a co-production journey, you think you're going from A to B. If you end up at C, it's where you were meant to be anyway. And don't be so rigid about where you think you're going, and co-production will teach you that, because you think you're answering this question and you think you've got an idea about what the answer will be, but when you start talking and working in that co-productive way, it often takes you in a completely different and you've got to be prepared for that, really, haven't you, Joe?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it was different. I mean, we thought at the start, and I kept saying, I don't think it's a leaflet, but it wasn't ever going to be a leaflet. But I think we thought it's going to be a conversation tool. And I remember the start of this it might have been, you know, we always hear about the transition from primary to secondary, for example, that falling down, you know, if you've got an EHCP and all these issues. And we thought, right, let's find a point in time, because what we can't do is create a product that can suit everything. So when we started that, and Rory, I don't know if you remember, but really early on, I think in one of the sessions, we kind of mapped it through, and the families kind of said, it's not about a point in time, it's about a change in behaviour. And because it's a change in behaviour, we could apply this to anything. And that's been really exciting, that actually the tool that we created, because originally it was about education, about talking to your school or your Senko, what even is a Senko, that was part of this. What about EHCPs? Kind of then came to this thing that we've created, that actually we can use it with any part of the system. And that's really exciting, that we're then not going down that route of, well, when it's education, we want to talk in this way, and when it's health, we need to be in that way. Actually, this is a tool that families have and they can use. And we're piloting it. So as a social enterprise, we want to now create this into some kind of, I don't want to say app, but some kind of tech that we can use, because obviously everything's techy now, isn't it? But Amber, I haven't seen you to kind of share it. When we worked with the navigators last, because they were thinking, yeah, we could use some of our families. They're also working with some young people at that kind of 17, 18 mark that want to be able to advocate and talk about things to themselves. So they are going to try the tool.
Brilliant.
So, and then come back with us. And so we might have a second version that's going to be tweaked and changed. That's going to be for young people.
I love it.
To be using, as well as for our families. So it's just kind of going off a little bit like this at the moment. But yeah, we've had some really good feedback so far, which is brilliant.
That's really interesting as we do our work here, Jo. But one of the things we've been looking at is like communication passports for young people. So when they're going in and out of hospital or in and out of services, they might be very distressed. How do they capture what's really important for them? And especially with our autistic young people, where they have sensory needs and things that are really important for settings to know about them, but they might not be in the place that they can actually communicate that at that time. So I'll have a further conversation about you, but if we could kind of link it into those kind of communication passports as well. So it's person held information, but they can share it with whoever they want to give somebody a better understanding of who they are as well. Because that comes up time and time again, getting really poor quality care for just not understanding the basics about somebody's autistic experience.
I've used them a lot in health.
Yes.
Yeah,
we've got one that we use at the hospital, but it's paper based. It isn't an app, and I think we need something a bit more funky that kids want to engage with. A bit more current, yeah. Kick us all into the 21st century.
Whether we want to or not.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Well, that's our presentation. If there isn't any other questions, you know, our contact details are on the slides. Please feel free to get in touch if you want to know anything else. But
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Vari. Thanks, Alice. Thanks, Jo.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.